Well, dude, thank you for jumping on here. Stoked to talk with you and talk to you about the thing that we have to do all the time is breath
hmm
and
hmm
many other topics. But I'm just obviously we've connected over the years, and you've really grown your presence on your podcast, uh, and and had some incredible interviews with some dear friends of mine, and just you've been charging, and then obviously getting to know what you've been doing, and really what I really came to after our conversation recently and getting prepared for this, it's like the best way to learn, and that you took the steps, you had passion, and then you actually learned from the best. And that's really what it's all about. It reminds me of like when I was superfood hunting. It's like, well, you gotta show up, you gotta get on planes, trains, whatever it is, to put yourself in that position to go beyond a Google search, to go beyond the almost the traps of normal ways of learning. And I think that kind of putting yourself in that apprentice role, um, and putting yourself out there, which there's a boldness to that, which I think, number one, I actually wasn't even thinking about it, but I want to talk about that because you've been cultivating your wellness force kind of empire, as well as now this incredible offshoot of learning and cultivating techniques around this very precious thing that we have, that we actually are very infantile in using, and that is our breath. So so welcome, brother.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you.
uh, yeah, man. So talk to me about your journey a bit. You don't have to go all the way back, but just the the wellness, 19 years of training and learning and everything else. But then you there was a shift, from my perspective, and then you really started
Yes.
cranking. What happened?
I mean, I can flash back to when we were at your home before the fires and thinking about the conversations we had about how do we sustain this unsustainable way of living and system. And it was about a year later where I just had a fundamental shift in my being. And I had already been studying the art of breath for a couple of years before we met. I think it was 2017 we did our podcast.
Sounds right.
And about right. And anyways, I was drawn to do breath work, not just for myself, but for now I realize in my future understanding for my family. My ability as a father to breathe properly is what mitigates stress and fights and drama. And so we are all experiencing that right now. So I would say the biggest turning point for me came, actually, it was in a plant medicine ceremony after you and I met. And I got my ass kicked. I am not pro or against plant medicine. I'm only pro situation. And by situation, I mean when somebody's called to plant medicine, it's a great thing. But when there's ego involved, look out. And so for me, there was a huge understanding in a plant medicine ceremony with ayahuasca that I was actually destined to go this path of breath work. And so at 4 in the morning after a ceremony, I purchased breathwork.io. I knew it because I'd started to feel the natural DMT release in my lungs. And that took me on a journey to Thailand. I ended up traveling to Thailand. I stayed in Koh Phangan for 30 days and did a really deep, intensive dive to myself and started learning about the art of breath. I learned from Mark Divine and Unbeatable Mind. That was actually in 2016. And then in the years that followed after my journeys to Thailand, I went to Sedona and I trained with Anahata Ananda, and I trained with Gwen Payne in Sedona. And just some of the people that brought me back home to myself were Dan Brule as well at the Bel Air Treehouse there in Los Angeles. And so learning from all these people, man, it's fundamentally shifted me. But honestly, Darin, it came after we met at your house. It was about a year later when things really shifted.
That's amazing. Well, there's so much that you said there that I have some parallels in terms of, I did ayahuasca 21 years ago, and the one thing that I remember more than anything is breath. If you feel like I don't want to say losing control, because that's kind of the point of it. The ego doesn't get to go on that journey, as we all know in the ayahuasca experience.
Yeah.
But then the breath, as anything's occurring, that the breath is the key. And it's interesting that you say that, because I too got the first journey I did, fantastic, because it was a really deep understanding, no drug I experienced in my life at that point. And then my ego said, well, let's do it with a bunch of my friends. And I got the shit kicked out of me. And very, very, almost to the point where off of the ceremony, it was actually dangerous, right? So it's a whole experience that I don't need to unpack.
Yep.
But I too, I have nothing for nor necessarily against, but it is literally a deep calling. And this, in this day and age, just to speak on this a second, obviously ayahuasca is coming of age in a certain sense in the environment of people who want to wake up, or whatever you want to call it. And there's pros and cons to much of that. So I would just say, make sure you check yourself in a lot of different ways. Anyone listening, that number one, I believe there is a certain level of knowing you should go into that with, before you just fling yourself into a scenario that could potentially be amazing, also could potentially be very difficult.
Dude, it sums it up. I heard this phrase a couple years ago, and I think it was from Jordan Peterson, and it was, be careful of unearned wisdom. Because when you go into a ceremony and you're not ready to receive the wisdom that, by the way, science and spirituality is just beginning to understand. If you're not ready to receive that, look the hell out, really, like, be careful, be kind. So I'm with you. And, after about a dozen ceremonies, I realized that it was my ego driving me. And that was when I transitioned from plant medicine to the breath, because everyone can breathe, yet no one is really doing it properly. They're just not. And neither was I.
Right. And that breath is such a bridge, because I saw it very quickly as well. I think switching from all that experience, and that experience gives me knowledge to this day, 21 years later. So it's not like it's, that's why it's like 300, 400 ceremonies. I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. You need to integrate a lot of information.
Yeah.
But breath is a bridge. And I remember doing a Kundalini class, and I hysterically started laughing. It was as if the DMT and everything, the experience was there. And I was like, oh, because here's the thing. And then I'll close on this, on my experience. Ayahuasca, literally, she told me, you never have to come here again.
That's right. I remember you saying that.
Because it's right there. Right.
Yeah.
And it's through the breath, and it's through that intention, and it's through all of those things. So it's such a beautiful thing that you discovered that, and then literally just poured your heart, your soul, your hard work into this thing that, on the one hand, people listening going, I completely don't understand. What do you mean? I'm breathing every day. But then there's the few, of the communities that have been exploring breath, obviously, and breath has been emerging as a thing, but there's a lot going on with it. Physiology, biology, spirituality, it connects kind of us all. So for you, because when you're having to cultivate all of this stuff, how do you then come to an understanding or a practice? Or is it that you're continuing to learn, but you're just trying to get it into a place where you can, like, what is your process? What was your process while you were learning? And now what is your process now, trying to kind of share it.
Yes, that's awesome. Well, I became a father this year, so that was a
Congratulations.
thank you. Yes, he's almost 5 months old. So, as all the parents watching, listening know, there are unique challenges that the universe or God, however you resonate, higher intelligence, there's something out there that controls all things and loves all things. That force is going to bring you challenges. And so, for me, when I started the breath work in 2016, I was a single bachelor. Like, I remember I was laying on the floor with Mark Devine and a bunch of special operations people, and I was crying. And I was like, what am I doing? I could not believe that I had tears coming out of my eyes doing this catharsis style breath work, which we'll get into the 3 phases of breath work. But the catharsis is when you do longer journeys, right? And I'm sure you've done them yourself. That's why you had the energy coming out with Kundalini. So when I first started learning, I was so green, Darin. I was so fresh. I literally was just like taking it in. I was just like a vacuum. I was going to every workshop I could. I was traveling around Southern California mostly because up until that point, I had really struggled with anxiety, like a lot of anxiety and sometimes depression, but mostly anxiety. And so I needed something beyond plant medicine. And yes, my soul guided me to these medicines, but ultimately it led me to my greatest gift, and that is breath, the art of breath. It's really an art form because art, just like our human relationships and evolution, changes over the course of time because the universe brings us brand new challenges every single year, maybe for some people every single month. So I look at when I started versus where I am now. If I didn't have the breath and if I wasn't practicing on a daily basis from 2016 all the way up till 2018, I probably wouldn't have even learned why I had the anxiety, which was a deep wounding with my father, a deep understanding that I needed with my mother, and a lot of forgiveness that I had to give to myself. I wouldn't have had that awareness, first of all. And then secondly, as I look at 2020 and what transpired, where we moved from Southern California, we moved from Encinitas to Austin. I'm here in Austin. That was very stressful. You know, moving is supposed to be one of the top 4 stressors in someone's life. So my practice started to evolve into not just doing breath work alone, but pairing breath work with cannabidiol, like safe vape cannabidiol, or going into the sauna and practicing breath work, or going into the cold tank and practicing breath work, or doing breath work in nature during a vision quest, which happened for me earlier this year. So I started to stack and really align other practices, other healing techniques with the art of breath, because the art of breath actually helped me get through them, and it helped me glean more wisdom from those experiences. And then of course stack parenthood on top of that, and whoa, like being a father, being sleep deprived. We didn't have the birth experience that we planned for. We ended up having to go to the NICU. And so I can remember just being in the hospital and just doing my breath work in the bathroom. You know, these tools are so powerful, yet we don't know how to access our biology, physiology, and a lot of people are doing breath work with improper posture. That's the big one. So that's the short evolution. I mean, obviously, man, there's a ton more, but the short evolution was that I went from green rookie who was trying to deal with his anxiety and just be in the present moment, to healing and forgiveness for others and self, to then stacking other healing experiences with breath, which just blows everything else out of the water. I mean, it's like, it truly is like getting high on your own supply, but there's no drugs needed, which is amazing.
Right. Yeah, no, it's, you know, we want to create so much of our experiences that we have to kind of get all these things from outside, and not, whether it's literally money or other resources, or in this case, the next hack, the next microcurrent, the next supplement, and all of this
Yeah.
stuff. And literally, you know, you go so much of the spectrum of breathing has all these different dimensions that literally touch on everything. And you know, I think of like some of the first times I got really involved with breathing is like, oh, increase your oxygen saturation, because man, the early 1900s, Dr. Otto Warburg came out and said, listen, high oxygen environment, no bacteria, disease, pathogen, virus can survive in a high rich oxygen environment. I'm like, holy shit, like that's massive, and that's
Yeah.
basic physiology. And then in the process of doing that, you're like, whoa, what's going on? Like my ancestors just like I'm sitting next to my buddies, you know, like
Yeah.
I'm like going, what, like as clear as day. And having had spiritual experiences, I'm like, I know the difference between those kind of messages. So that and an infinite amount of other things breath touches on and allows us to use when understanding it. So let's get into it.
Yes.
Let's get into that, because
Let's do it.
it's literally, and I love what you're doing, because you're putting something together that's going to touch on everything. And it's the greatest one of, literally, hold your breath and see how important oxygen is. They say that all the time, but it's so bloody true.
Yeah.
And it's such a downregulator, activator, physiology, biology, chemistry, spiritual, you name it. So let's dig in. How do you unpack it? How do you
Yeah.
describe breath work and the different dimensions that it has?
So think of breath work as a lever for your automatic or your autonomic nervous system. It's the only
Yes.
thing that we can pull. We cannot digest our food faster. We cannot make our arterioles or our blood flow move faster unless you're like a Shaolin monk. I've heard they can do some crazy things. But think about the automatic or the autonomic nervous system. Obviously, there's two branches, which I'm sure you've covered on the show, but just a quick lesson. The sympathetic nervous system is what regulates up when we are being chased by a tiger, when we're in traffic, when we're in stress, when we're fighting. Parasympathetic is when we're digesting food, we're resting. It's where we have what's called vagal tone, which is the second point. So we pull that lever for the autonomic nervous system because it's the only way we can modulate our stress. It truly is. Some people have described this, like Dr. Belisa Vranich, who was one of my teachers as well. She said that breath work is meditation for people who can't meditate. And I thought that was so beautiful, because truly, when you are singularly focused on that lever we're talking about for your autonomic, you can shift from a lifestyle and really a repetitive action syndrome of constantly being in sympathetic, stressed out, checking your phone, checking the computer, kids screaming. Like, it's a lot. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We all experience it every day. So nature, in her infinite wisdom, gave us this modulation, this e-brake, this lever that we can voluntarily use. And also, here's the crazy part, it's involuntary. You don't breathe you in your sleep, yet you can breathe how you want to when you're awake, which is pretty freaking awesome. So I think that's the best way to describe it, is this lever. Obviously, there is a ton of biological processes that happen in combination with our ancient brain, the amygdala, the vagus nerve, vagal toning that we can talk about. But that's like really the high level that everyone can understand. A 10-year-old can understand. If you take a deep breath, you feel better, right? Well, that's the biological process of shifting over to the parasympathetic.
Yeah, and it's a lot different than just I'm surviving my life, and of course I'm breathing today. And you talk about the getting chased, but now we're in this dynamic modern day world where that stress has now been carrying with us almost call it 24/7 when we're awake. um
Yeah.
and sometimes doesn't even shut off, because it certainly can run
Well, we're being
in.
programmed by this. I'm
Yeah,
holding up a phone. So
yeah,
that's included with what you're describing.
exactly. So it's almost the necessary medication that probably didn't exist as humans back in the day, because they were listening more to the instincts. They were less manipulated through and by our senses. I mean, salt, sugar, and fat. I mean, and chemicals is a hell of a combination to manipulate most people in eating things that they don't want, right?
Yeah.
Or don't perceive as an instinctual thing to choose. So we're getting manipulated all the time. So because of that, because of the stress, that lever, I love that term, that lever that we literally deep breath without even, let's not even unpack that. Like,
Yeah.
let's not even say it's nose or mouth or whatever, but literally just taking a breath or two or three can shift everything. And imagine if you're stressed out, digestion doesn't work, it's shut off because it's supposed to be, because it has to divert energy and adrenaline and everything else towards the stress response. Like, eating while stressed
Mm.
It's like such a bad combination, just that alone,
Oh
right?
man, I had a moment during a vision quest this year where I made a promise to myself to take 6 breaths before every single meal,
Yeah.
because I realized, like, okay, just because I'm teaching, I also get to practice. And I think probably the most severe practice is when we're stressed and we need to, quote, eat in a hurry. That's such a big one. I bet everybody can relate to that. You know,
Yeah.
when's the last time you took some breaths before you ate your food, and how much better your digestion will be? I mean, forget about
Yeah.
supplementation. That's the biggest supplement you could ever have, is calming down before you eat food. Like, probably one of the largest, actually.
Totally. And then it sets all the metabolic processes accordingly instead of from a stress response. And then we wonder why we're overweight. We wonder why we're bloated. We wonder why we're gassy. Well, that's a major, major contributor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, so yeah, so the lever, we have control, and just a little thing like people can, every meal that they're going to have throughout the day, just take those breaths, and then you could even add in a little gratitude while you're sitting there too. Have your own little prayer and your breathing, your gratitude, and it's a hell of a way to kind of start any meal or start any day. It's such a powerful thing. So,
Yes.
so then, um, so from there, what were some of the fascinating things you were discovering as you were practicing all of these different approaches? Like, what were some of those? Whoa, I had no idea. Maybe it was experimental, maybe it was intellectual.
Yeah. The biggest one was my understand. It was an intellectual one first, and
Mm,
then it was more of a somatic one. So that we have this structure in our brain called the default mode network. And the default mode network is the prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate, the amygdala, and I think there's a couple other parts, but those are the main 3 that we can focus on. And the default mode network is what is activated that searches for danger when we're doing a myopic task, when we're singularly focused. So that's why Belisa Vranich says that breathwork is for people that can't meditate. It's become meditators. So I was like blown away at the research. And actually, I pulled from Michael Pollan's work,
mm,
where he was doing a lot of studies for patients that were dealing with very, very chronic PTSD. And they were doing plant medicine and they were doing breathwork with them. And there's many studies, if you look on PubMed, that point to the science of not just pulling that lever, but actually rewiring the neuroplasticity in your brain over time. Because people that deal with chronic PTSD, they have like low glutamate. And so when their glutamate isn't connecting and they're not getting that transfer of energy potential, they stay stuck. So people stay stuck, which is, and I promise I'll go back to the science, but when people are depressed, it's because their energy is being depressed. It's the opposite of expression is depression. So when I'm not expressing myself, when my glutamate, my brain's messed up from trauma or PTSD or whatever happens, and trauma can be capital T and lowercase t, I fall into these energy pathways where there's no way out. There's really no path for me out. So for me personally, dealing with anxiety, which is a focus on the future, it's a fear to be in the current moment. It was radical to learn about the default mode network because I started to gather all this scientific body when I built the Breathe program around, wow, I can actually talk to the people that are analytical and that think breath work doesn't do anything. I can talk to the people that think breath work is woo-woo when actually it's purely scientific. It's also woo-woo at the same time. And so the default mode network, man, what breath work does, specifically when you do circular breathing, and also box breathing as well, but we can focus more on the circular breathing, is it shortens the time that that default mode network searches for stress. And over the course of time, it'll actually turn down the volume. And there's heat maps. They do what's called PET scans for people in hospitals. The heat maps will actually shrink. So the default mode network, when somebody is practicing their circular breathing, will go down. The energy and the blood flow to the danger and the fear mechanism in the brain will go down. Now extrapolate that on a societal level with cell phones and news media and fear and neighbors screaming at you. Like, we're in a very unhealthy society. Krishnamurti says it is no measure of stress to be well adapted to a profoundly sick society. Like, we're in a profoundly sick society. So we have to have tools like breath to really defend ourselves from our own biology, which is such a paradox. So I think the default mode network was like the number one thing.
wow. And, we just got off, we're recording this, a few days away from Veterans Day, and you can't help
Yes.
but to think of the PTSD and any trauma, like any severe trauma can leave people with PTSD and it's unrecognized, but certainly the veterans that have fought for our freedom, you think about that stuff. So I kind of want to do you want to do a little circular breathing
I would
just
love
since
it.
we talked about it? And
Yes.
as long as no one's driving and they're going to do it, or
Right. Don't
if,
close your eyes.
don't close your eyes and do anything. But any
Sure.
of you who are safe and want to experience, since we're talking about circular breathing, we're good. Just do a little example right now.
Let's do it. So right now I'm sitting on a lotus style chair. Maybe you're standing wherever you are. If you're standing, make sure you're on something comfortable and your knees are slightly bent.
Hmm.
The reason for that is just blood flow. The second thing, if you're seated, just make sure that your knees are below your hips. They don't have to be drastically below your hips, but knees a little bit below your hips. Roll your neck around a few times. Relax your traps. Maybe your back pops. And just actually get in your body for a second. This is the psychosomatic component of breathing, is that you want to fully inhabit your body. You want to actually be with yourself, not checking your phone, not going around. So before we do the breath, set your posture, your hips, your spine, and your neck. Think of it like your back is flat against a wall. So just straighten your spine so your head, your shoulders, and your hips are all in a straight line. And just take one clearing breath. You're going to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And now as we do our 6 circular breaths, which we can extrapolate more, I don't know how deep you want to go. You want to do like a couple minutes?
Yeah, a couple minutes.
Let's do a couple minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to breathe like a circle. And so close your eyes wherever you are. If you're driving, obviously don't close your eyes, pull over. And just put both hands on your belly button. And practice, before we get into the 2 minutes of breathing together, practice breathing in and out of your mouth without a pause. Visualize like you're drawing a circle. So breathe in through your nose. And notice how I'm not pausing at the top or the bottom. I'm literally connecting my breath like it's a circle. For people that have their hands on their belly, just keep breathing in that fashion. I want you to imagine and visualize with your eyes closed and your jaw relaxed that you have a balloon behind your belly button. Every time you draw a circle, you fill up the balloon with air. Every time you draw a circle, you fill up the balloon with air. And let's breathe together for 2 minutes. I'm going to set a timer. And I'm going to guide you. I'm going to break my breath with you, but keep going as of right now. And we're going to go for 2 minutes. So inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth without a pause. Draw a circle, fill a balloon behind your belly button. So inhale through your nose. And just keep breathing in that way, drawing a circle with no breaks, filling a balloon behind your belly button. Nice, gentle breath in through your nose. Nice, smooth exhale through your mouth. And every time you do that, see if you can fill the balloon a little bit more with your own air. Consciously connect to your breath. Visualize that you are the circle. You are the air in the balloon, because you are. And as you breathe for just 1 more minute, feel connections from the warmth of your hands to your belly button, and allow the warmth of your hands to give you comfort wherever you are. And as we taper down our last minute, just continue your circular breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth with no pausing, full somatic connection to your hands on your belly. Scan your body quickly. Breathe into wherever there is stress, wherever there is tension, wherever there is anything other than peace and relaxation. And for these last 20 seconds, just continue your breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. Wholeness is a circle. We breathe like a circle because we are whole. And take 2 more circular breaths. And now slowly open your eyes and take a big inhale through your nose. And hold for 15 seconds. Maybe take a tiny another sip of air through your nose. Feel how luxurious it is to be completely saturated with your own oxygen, and then let go of it with an audible sound. And then just return to your normal breathing.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
I always laugh after I do breathing too because I feel so good.
Oh, so just think of that, everyone. Yeah. And I hope all of you who didn't do it, go right back in the recording and just do it. Because the feeling, the power, the potency, the ability, the downshift, there is no need to read a science book or research paper to realize and feel and perceive and receive what you feel after and during. It's just is. And that's how powerful it is. Dude,
Maybe
thank you
even
for that.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure. And actually, I was feeling deeper and deeper connected to you as we were breathing the whole time, like we were in the same wavelength. And that's what breath does. Breath brings coherence. If you look at the work of Heart Math and the Heart Math Institute, they actually have coherence breathing, which is where they put devices on your ear. And like you said, Darin, nobody needs a device to know how they feel great after doing that. But again and again and again, there's like waterfall after waterfall of science. And so there's molecular mimicry in the heart and the brain, and the same thing happens when we focus on our heart and we're breathing actually through our heart. That's a more advanced practice. You know, Chaga knows about breathing because Chaga breathes like a bellow. Chaga breathes horizontally. He doesn't breathe vertically. We have all been taught, because of stress, because of the default mode network, and because of our parents, and God bless them, like, look, this isn't about demonizing our parents. They taught us to not breathe through our nose, and they taught us to breathe vertically. What is the number one thing that people do when they're in domestic violence? They hold their breath and they go like this because they're ready to fight. Look at a boxer.
Yeah,
Boxer with their
shoulders are up. Yeah.
Shoulders are up, right? So we're on guard. We can learn so much from Chaga and from nature because they breathe like a bellow. They breathe outward and inward. Mm-hmm. And they have a really great somatic toolkit to get rid of their stress. When animals are being hunted and they survive, they shake it off and they go back to eating tulips, whatever it is. So this is a massive call for us to return to nature in so many ways. Yeah. And if anybody just felt a glimpse of that, I implore you to go further, go further in your discovery, because if you can feel that in 2 minutes, imagine what you can feel in 21.
Yeah. Well, you said something really powerful. I read this book. What's it called? The Waking the Tiger.
Peter Levine.
Yes. And God, this was 25 years ago.
So good.
And so think about it, people, like if we're carrying any sort of stress and you don't regulate that and dissipate it, the animals know that if they survive that attack, if they don't discharge that immediately upon them feeling safe, they know they will die, because any sort of other threat, they will be instantly paralyzed and be killed. So for us, we come up with scenarios and justifications and all of this stuff, and we get back and we've divorced ourselves from nature, right? We've surrounded ourselves in cocoons and artificial lights and spend most of our days inside, 93%. And and what Josh is saying, this is the most powerful entrance back into that coherence with nature and our fellow human and our pets, our environments. And that's needed more than ever right now.
It makes me take a deep breath just listening to you.
Yeah,
it's needed because there's been a massive divorce. It's been happening for a long time. I think we're just really aware of it now because of the severity of the exclusion and the cancel culture and the division. There's like this line of demarcation between human beings that we're all the same, yet people like to identify Republican, Democrat, left, right, this, that, pro, anti, whatever the subject. And it's just madness. It really is madness. Like, if we can just come together and breathe and start to follow some of the imprinting that our generations have received forever, for millennia, which is drink clean water, follow the rules that I'm sure you talk about in your one-to-one tribe. Like, this is all what we're supposed to do, right? And when we fight that, when we go against it, it's like rowing up a river the wrong way. It really hurts us, and we develop disease and cancerous things, not just cancer somatically or physically, like cancer as a society. We become cancerous towards each other. And that is what is like really heavy on my heart lately. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Like, it's a heavy time. I feel like this program and our mission and what we're doing, like, it's needed now, literally more than ever, because the time is now. And look at the monstrosity of attacks that we have to our psyche right now, not just from news media, but also from your fellow human being who, unfortunately, God bless their soul, like, they have been consumed by fear. And so how do we get out of fear? Well, we breathe. Yeah. We start by breathing. Then, of course, we stack from there. But that's the fundamental space where we come back together.
Well, if you don't have that center point, how are you supposed to come up with any good idea that's going to be coherent for not only us as an individual, but us as a collective? As you're talking, I'm sitting there going, wouldn't it be I would like to observe this and see it happen, but how amazing would it to be if we're Congress, House of Representatives, whatever governing body of almost anything, if you started every hearing, every gathering with a coherent breath, right? Of just literally that center point, that place, that connection. That's why, like, all of us breathing on this podcast today, we literally were connected throughout time, throughout space. We literally come into a coherence, and what we're seeing is incoherent nature and behavior and all of that stuff. And it's like that, that literally is a center point. And then we can build upon those things. And I think we all, at some level, we know that. This isn't something we're trying to convince you of. We're just speaking to that. Like, if you didn't just feel a difference of your regular breathing and that breathing, then I guess you're not from here, and you may be, breathing in some other thing other than oxygen or whatever. But that, to me, and like you said, it's funny because there's a terminology of biohacking. It's like, I just, it's almost laughable.
Yeah.
Because it's literally just, we're having these conversations. It's kind of insane that we swung so far. We're like, hey, everybody, you should breathe.
You should breathe. You should sleep. Yeah. You should drink water that's not polluted. Like, these are very fundamental. Imagine going back to our ancestors and telling them that, like 500 years ago, they wouldn't even understand what we were saying because they would just do it.
Right.
It's just something, and we're not that far removed from them. If you look at our epigenetic expression, we're really the same. We really are. We have all these fancy things. I mean, I'm blessed. We get to talk through this computer. We get to reach all these human beings like us, like that care, that want to make themselves better and the world better. But gosh, we've become so removed from what that even means. Like, how do we make the world better without hurting one another, without hurting the earth itself? We're in this. And look, I just got to go off for 1 second. We're in this crazy echo chamber of progress where technology and metaverse and all this crap, it's like, you guys, just because something can be done does not mean that it should be.
Right.
Just because I can go out and eat an entire chocolate cake in my driveway does not mean I should do that. It might be fun, but I'll pay the price of it, So all these things where we have technology, and I'm not anti-technology. I'm pro-mindful technology, conscious technology. I'm not anti-capitalism. I'm very pro-conscious capitalism. Look what John Mackey's doing. Look what you're doing. Look what Zach Bush is doing. Like, capitalism is a vehicle for change. Yet, just because we can do something at the edge of whatever vehicle we're using does not mean that we should always strive for constant year over year over year growth. Nowhere in nature does constant year over year growth ever exist. Everything has a birth, life, and death cycle, which brings life to the new life. So
Right.
we literally are like, all the clues are in front of us. All you have to do is go outside your door, walk on a trail, go on a mountain. Everything's there, but we're ignoring it because we're in fear.
Yeah. Yeah. We set it up these paradigms where they're extractive paradigms. And the great Paul Hawken wrote Drawdown, and then his new book, Regeneration. And he's like, literally, the regeneration is looking through the lens of nature. And if we're continue down this extractive process on every, like you're saying, in every way, then we just have more and more. You look at fashion industry; it's the second largest polluter on the planet. You look at the agricultural industry; it's the number one polluter on the planet. All of these things in the way of creating food for us, creating clothes for us, whereas we actually don't have to do any of that. And the way we're even creating our quote unquote food is extractive. It's leaving the soils now as dirt with nothing left but chemical soups and et cetera, et cetera. But so that is the lens, that is the road we've traveled. And now you, I, and all of us listening, we're here right now.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do that, but now as my actions are, I'm participating in it. And now we can see from a grander perspective. And we can see like, oh, I need to take my shoes off, put my feet on the ground in the sun. I gotta I gotta be aware, like what kind of clothes, like literally, am I sucking in formaldehyde and dyes right now? Like, oh yeah, I am. Okay, I need to look at that. What kind of water am I drinking? What kind of food am I eating? Like, where did it come from? So all of these things, we're going back to that. I hope more than ever. But it's
Well,
like,
we definitely are here on your
yeah,
podcast.
yeah. Yeah.
The people that are here with us, we feel it. I feel what you're saying immensely. I mean, gosh, the removal of so many things from our system. We need detoxification on a whole different kind of level. Yeah, we need physical detox for sure, but we need emotional and mental detox right now really, really badly. There's a narrative that's forcing people to stay at home and forcing people to do things they don't want to do. We don't need to go into that, but you guys know what I mean.
Yeah.
So that right now is actually, I think, like kind of the lowest hanging fruit, the most important thing. Then from there, let's get more aware. And then awareness is this circular wheel where there's breath, there's movement, there's all these things. But hopefully my prayer is that we lift the veil and see that behind the curtain is the Wizard of Oz is actually on the microphone with green cape. Like that's really what's happening right now. So a little esoteric, but I know you feel what I'm talking about. Like I know everybody understands.
Yeah. Well, and then it comes down to breath. You take a breath in to start your life. You're in spirit, and
Yes.
then you exhale, and that's it. So then we go back to like, so, okay, man and woman in the mirror, looking in the mirror. What can I do? How can I build myself up? How can I empower myself? How can I alter the depression and increase the expression? I love that you said that. And again, we go back to the sovereignty that we have. It is so much, right? If you don't think there's a miracle, the next cut you get, look down and see that it heals itself. Holy shit, we are living in a miracle on an infinite level, and we have so much power. And I love that breath is that entry point to some of the greatest power generation we have on all of these levels. So let's nerd out a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's get into a little bit of your top like wow moments that you've discovered with breath and the physiology, biology, chemistry, and even whatever else you want to get into.
One thing that I love the most, and for many people it's uncomfortable, it's called tetany. It's where your hands go like this and your mouth closes. It's hypoxia, right? Yeah. So people that have done this, and this might be a good jumping off point. Like there are, in my opinion, and in my 5 years now, almost 6 years of research, 3 ways that we really experience breath and breath work. I think that there's meditative style where it's like in the morning We're doing it to clear our mind, to set us up for meditation. That's meditative breathing. Then there's acute breathing. And acute breathing is when somebody's going on a stage and they're nervous, or they're fighting with their spouse, or they're in traffic, or they're having a panic attack. There's two specific practices in the Breathe program we built deal with people that have panic attacks. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, right? But these are things that have helped a lot of people. And I actually had a pediatrician write in. She bought the program. She wrote in and she was like, wow, I have never been guided through something like this. And the testimonials right there at breathwork.io, so you guys can see it. Like, this is a pediatrician that works with children. And I thought to myself, how amazing would it be to teach children that second phase of breathwork, which is the acute, right? Because getting kids to sit still, I don't know, you have to be a pretty skilled parent to do that. So phase one, sit still, learn how to breathe properly with your posture, your somatics, and your breathing musculature. Phase two, acute breathing. Learn how to breathe when you're super stressed, when it matters the most. And then phase three is catharsis breathing. That's when you're doing a lot of what Wim Hof has brought to the mainstream. Unfortunately, people do that without a lot of training. That's a whole nother conversation. But these longer 30, 60, 90-minute cathartic breathwork sessions, they can be incredibly healing. A lot of what Levine talks about in Waking the Tiger, and a lot of what Bruce Lipton talks about, are that the issues are literally stored in our tissues. We have these efferent and afferent endings in our brain and our nerves that send and receive messages at lightning speed. And so when you go through physical trauma, emotional trauma, sense memory trauma, breath can actually bring so much of a shaking up. On a biological level, you're actually experiencing hypoxia, which is a loss of oxygen, especially when you do a longer breath hold retention. When you're moving energy through the tissues, through the meridians, through the energy centers in the body, you are going to get a flushing out of whatever emotions or sense memory you have stored. So think of it like in that third phase of breath, on a scientific level, what's happening is you're literally putting your psyche through like a pasta roller. You're squeezing out anything that wants to come out, depending on how deep you go into your journey. And just like we talked about plant medicine, I do not suggest, Darin, that people like sprint to a catharsis breathwork. Like, take your time. Be kind, man. Be gentle. Like, what's the rush? Do some 10-minute sits. Do some 7-minute practices that we have in the program. Do some 21-minute practices. Then go sit with a skilled facilitator and make the investment, and make sure that that person is trauma informed, that they actually know how to hold you if stuff comes up for you, which it most likely will. These are things like when I do a cathartic journey with a client, it's 4 hours. I have someone come over, we do hot, cold, I do the healing mat with the higher dose, then we do our breath work, then we do our journaling, then we do our integration. It's a long process. So I would just caution anyone that's feeling excited about this to please don't treat this like we treat many things in our life, where we have to get it all at once, do it in one weekend. Like, go at the speed of nature when it comes to learning the breath. I think 3 weeks is a pretty good amount of time. That's why I built the program for 3 weeks, because I thought, okay, week 1, you're going to learn. Week 2, you're going to start integrating. Week 3, you know how to use these tools on your own. Because we just need time, Darin. We're all in a freaking hurry, man. I don't want people to be in a hurry when they learn breath work. So dedicate 3 weeks of your time for this. So those 3 phases, I think, is a beautiful place for any other biological discussion or stress reduction or whatever you want to discuss. But as long as we can be aware of those 3 things and those 3 phases, I think we're good as a society.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is so funny because we do, and I've done it a million times too. It's like we want our cake and eat it too, and we just jump into these things similar to the ayahuasca thing. Yeah. It's not responsible, and then it gets all wrapped up in the ego, and then the ego takes ownership of all this stuff. And it's just not a good path to go down. But I love the fact that there has to be a learning, because it's relearning, because it's stress response breathing, which is pretty much what everybody almost all day in the modern day world is doing. Like, it's this upper register kind of breathing. What are some, maybe give some people some tricks and hacks and things that they can do? Because I really encourage people to check out I can't wait to jump into the breathe. gosh, I've been doing all kinds of breathing stuff for the last 10 years. And
Awesome.
like there's been 2-3 hours of doing stuff. And like I said,
Wow.
I don't need ayahuasca. I mean, not
No.
anymore,
Yeah.
but I don't need ayahuasca. Like those doors that I'm familiar with, because they got opened, they open, and you're like, whoa. Like, so
Yeah.
when Josh is saying that there is a lot, this is an incredible tool, from the most basic to literally manage and mitigate your day's stress, which is so infinitely healthy and beneficial for anyone. And then you add that up over time, just doing a little things throughout the day. But then once you start to learn more, your practice, your connection with yourself, your connection, like there's so many benefits that you can build upon. So what are some of those, you know, the tricks and hacks that people can take with them today?
Yeah. Biggest trick or hack. You know, I feel like breath actually is the original biohack. It really is, because
Yes. Yeah.
to go back to the very beginning of this podcast, it's truly the only automatic lever we can pull. It's
Yeah.
the only one. We
It's
can't do anything else.
it's the true OG.
It's the true
It's the
OG biohack. So if you guys are spending like thousands of dollars on PEMF mats, and don't get me wrong, like I have some pretty cool stuff. So
yeah.
I'm not hating on that, but start with what you're already doing and optimize that first. That might not seem like a trick or a hack, but I promise you, if you're looking for a trick or a hack, that is the best thing you could ever do, is
Yeah.
to literally, if you could just for 3 weeks commit to yourself to have a morning practice of breath, nothing else. Don't even work out. Don't even train. Seriously. I mean, obviously, if you want to add that, go for it. But like commit to one thing. And I found this from BJ Fogg, and I consulted some of his work to design the program, because a lot of his work is around tiny habits and behavior change. And so what he says is literally like start with just brushing your teeth while standing on one foot. Like that's what starts to cue the change reflex in our behavior. Then the next day, do one more activity, like put your shirt on after you brush your teeth. For breath work, start by doing 6 conscious connected breaths every morning with your proper posture, which we talked about on this podcast. We talk about it in the Breathe program. And then from that place, add one more thing at a time. Then focus on your posture. Then focus on your visualization. Then focus on your breathing musculature. Then focus on your breath hold. Then focus on maybe increasing your breath hold. Then focus on your intention. Start stacking one conscious thing at a time on top of your base, which is those 6 conscious connected breaths. Remember, breathe like a circle. You fill your belly with like a balloon right behind your belly button. Do that. Like do that to start. It might seem super mundane. You might be like, well, I'm not transformed yet. Well, it's because transformation isn't something that happens in one day. Transformation happens in large quantities of time. Look how long it takes a butterfly to become a butterfly. I mean, it's got to freaking struggle in the chrysalis. It's got to liquefy. So
Yeah.
we do the same thing, Darin. And I think the biggest hack, the biggest trick we could ever do when it comes to breath is breathe like a circle, know why you're breathing, connect to it, and then stack different pieces on top of that. And also get guidance. You know, a lot of people, unfortunately, they are reverse breathing pattern people. I've had a lot of clients come over, and when they will breathe in through their nose, their belly will actually go in instead of out. And so there's but that's actually chronic, and it's taught to us.
Wow.
A super fast example is this: if you cover a baby's nose when they come out of the womb, it'll start to choke. It'll start to choke, and I covered my son's nose just for a second because I wanted to see if what I read was true, and it's true. You know why? Is because we are all born to have relaxed jaw muscles with our mouth slightly closed, and we're born to breathe through our nose. But we're taught not to do that because of the monstrosity of stress that our nervous system is trying to regulate and process. So start there. Start breathing through your nose. Start breathing like a circle, and do it in a way that makes you inspired, which in spiritus is Latin for breathing. Inspire yourself to start seeing where else this can take you. If you've done a lot of things, like maybe you've gotten in a trap of the mind. A lot of people, Darin, they'll take lots of training programs that are all cognitively focused. I call it being a victim of intellectualization. You guys got to listen to the solo cast that I recorded. It's so good. I'm not self-serving here. Like, it's a lot of research. We all fall into a trap of becoming a victim of our own mind. We all think that by reading the thing or buying the course or buying the book that we'll somehow be transformed, but we miss the real phase of intelligence, which is to gather information, you know, to be in a tribe like yours, to purchase a program, but to actually do it is what transcends us to embodiment. So we gather, we apply, we do, then we embody, but we're in a society that just makes us gather all the time. And we've kind of lost the art of applying and of embodying. So that's the biggest hack. It's not really a hack though.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
not a hack at all.
But that's a massive point. And the breath can do that, to literally in the body, embody that. It reminds me of this incredible, maybe 30 years ago, and you and I share Vision Quest.
Yes.
We can discuss it another time. So I was doing a lot of work with Native Americans and a group out of Colorado when I lived there. And this elder came, surprised us. And he was maybe 86 at the time. And it was Wallace Black Elk that came from the lineage of Black Elk, one of the most famous Native Americans. And he came in and really started just kind of, stories are flowing out of him. And I remember this like it was yesterday. He said, I don't understand why kids are running around with their brains on their backs when it is all here in silence and stillness. And he was pointing up at the lodge in that receiving and embodying the wisdom instead of having a book and trying to shove it in your brain and have some sort of knowledge that way. And it just rang so true. And I think from that point on, all of my education turned. And when I started learning about superfoods, I was reading and doing the research, and I was like, no. I actually have to jump on a plane and go.
Yeah. Because
I have to learn and experience and embody and take in and be overwhelmed with the infinite wisdom that is out there within the people, within the land, within the food, within the processing, within it, everything. That's it. And there is nothing more embodying than learning, being humble and going, you don't know, I can guarantee most people who haven't done any breath work, you're not breathing correctly. I can pretty much bet the farm that you're impacted by the world's events. We all are. You're in a high level of stress, probably higher than almost a mean level higher than we've ever experienced. A perfect remedy is getting in touch with yourself through your breath. And that is the medicine.
That was medicine. A really beautiful story. I was reflecting on something that Ben Stewart told me. He directed the Psychedelica series on Gaia. He sat behind me here in the studio, and he told me, he said, when the Lakota would meet, they would meet in a circle. And after every man would share, they would all take a breath. They would all take one big breath because A, they wanted to respect the person, make sure they were done sharing, and B, it connected everyone again. And what you're talking about, I mean, my whole body's kind of lit up right now because that's the truth we all need. We need to take our deep breath. We need to let somebody finish what they're saying so that we can, first of all, be open to whatever they're saying. And that includes people that have a different opinion than you. We've lost the art of conversation. We've lost the art of breath. But we can find it real quick. I mean, it's right here. This art of conversation has been so fun today. It's been so good because I listen to you. You listen to me. We're listening to each other. We're not always maybe 100% agreeing, but we're open to letting the other person share. I mean, I don't feel like there's much we've disagreed on, but maybe we have different words to describe it. And I think, if anything, please follow that peace, that calmness, that breath, that pause that we've touched upon today, because, it really does hold the answers. Yes, it's spiritual, but you know what? It's also scientific. I don't care who you are, logical or spiritual. Like this is the path that we are all being pushed towards right now. We're all being guided that way.
And what are you going to choose? Are you going to be a force of calm in the world, or are you going to be a force of a stress ball, creating more stress in a wake of chaos? Like, what do you want to choose? Like, you call it your ego, call it whatever, but we do have to. It comes down to this. It literally comes down to yourself, about what you're doing, what you're not doing, and then in this type of connection, and then proliferating that in the world and being okay. Like, I'm okay, I'm not as connected with some friends anymore just because of differences, but it doesn't mean I have to judge them for it. It doesn't mean that
Yeah.
we're not part of the family.
Yeah.
And that's a learning we all have to go through. And again, there's so much to talk about, because I also like, there's such a performance piece, because I like being a physical person, such a performance piece to breath. Maybe just touch on that a little bit, because for me, I actually still just, I mean, I do breath in the morning, but after workouts, oh my God,
Sure.
I love for me, I love the shift from being very, purposely stressing out my body and then downshifting as quickly as possible in this calm space. And to me, I think it is a unbelievable way to recover. And plus, for all the physiological things, you're hyper oxygenating. That oxygen's
Yes.
connecting to the lactic acid. It's pulling the lactic acid out. But honestly, that downshift of like throwing around heavy iron and then you're done with your workout and then boom, shifting down. So maybe just touch on a little
Sure.
performance stuff that you like.
The immunity part of this is cool, and it dovetails to performance, because if you look at what is on most people's hearts and minds right now, they want to bolster their immunity, right? So 70% of how we cleanse and detox the body is breath. 70%. Like, the other 30% is bladder and bowels. So if 70% of how we get rid of stale energy and stale microbes and stale just biology is by breathing, 70%, then wouldn't it just make sense, without fighting? Wouldn't it just make logical sense to learn how to optimize that part of our faculty, to optimize that? So that's the first thing. Also, when we look at performance, the breath hold retentions, Darin, the box breathing that I learned from Mark Divine. And if you look at, also, I can send you some studies for the show notes from PubMed, box breathing specifically for people that are in high tension. And I guess exercise for some people could be very, very high tension. This is where increased nitric oxide synthase, and that's different than the other NO, nitric oxide synthase. This is what has a positive effect on cell tissues. So that's probably what you're feeling when you're doing, I don't know if it's box breathing, it's maybe some kind of breath hold retention practice, like a box. So those two things are like the number one. And then from there, look, you can extrapolate a lot of beautiful things from breath as far as cellular repair and tissue repair. But the one that hit me was the NO synthase. That was like, okay, that really makes sense. Because the longer you can have, think of it like this. If you cut an apple and the apple gets corroded, that's oxidative stress.
Right, when it turns brown and everything.
Turns brown. We're all dying. I don't know if you knew that or not. You and I are dying, so let's make the most of it, right? So when we're exposed to oxygen, oxygen corrodes us. So if we can decrease our oxidative stress, breath being one of those ways, we'll live longer. I mean, you don't have to be a scientist to understand that. Cut an apple, it turns brown, right? Make sure that we're getting out 70% of our detoxification pathway through the breath. We're going to live longer. Make sure we're doing our acute breath work so that we're not flying off the handle and creating more stress, more cortisol, more drama. Make sure that we're doing our meditative practice in the morning and that we know how to do that and that we're facilitated through that. And then make sure when you feel called that you maybe go to a cathartic journey and you release what really, from a biological perspective, is probably draining you the most. And that is trauma and stress that your subconscious is holding on to, and it's not going to let go of it until you give it permission to release.
And usually carrying around the past.
And carrying around the past. I mean, for me, it was like forgiveness. It was forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others. And that's a constant process too, because as I said earlier, like the universe brings us unique challenges all the time that we will continually get to heal ourselves from. So there's no end game until we leave. But look, we're here now. Like, can we just be kinder to each other? I mean, that's really what this is about. Can I just, ever since I was a little kid, Darin, I'm like, why do these adults treat each other so shitty? Like, why do people treat each other so bad? It's because they're not breathing. It's because they're traumatized. It's because they don't have the somatic tools. They don't know about anything we've talked about today. So share this podcast with somebody that, doesn't even know, doesn't even has no awareness of this scientific method at all.
I'm thinking about all the people I grew up with in a small town in Minnesota. Like, you know what I mean? I just think of like, they're not even remotely thinking about all this stuff. But then we get used to a way of being that this is just who I am. So a level of stress, a level of reaction. Oh, he just flies off the handle. She just does this, blah, 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 blah. All these excuses, when in fact, we do have tools. We do have an ability to take a different approach to every reaction that we don't feel like we can. So how we respond to life is the key, right? So
can I say one more thing?
Yeah,
man. You know what I've been feeling a lot lately too is people are afraid of what might come up when they do their breathing. And I get it, because personally, I've never experienced sexual abuse, but I know a lot of people have. Personally, I've never been beaten, but I know a lot of people have, right? I have my own trauma. So do you. So do we all. I think to be human is to have trauma. But what happens is there is a fear, Darin, where people don't want to do breath work because they're kind of afraid. And I want to presence this. They're afraid of what might come up. Don't be afraid of it, because it's there anyways. It's there anyways. You don't need to be afraid of it. And if you are afraid of it, work with a facilitator or work with someone or be involved in a community that is willing to face your fears, because sometimes your fears aren't even yours. There's something that your mom and dad gave you. There's something you learned from society. There's something that when you were a little kid, you thought was true. And as an adult, you're carrying it around and you don't even have a conscious connection as to why. So have the courage to do this kind of work. I'm like you, like I think talk therapy is beautiful. I think that a lot of Harville Hendricks work and a lot of work in the space of emotional intelligence is beautiful. But man, if you really want to move the energy out of your body, you must move the body. You must move the breath, move your tissues, move your cells. So I had to presence that, because I think there might have been, and I felt it, there might have been some people that are a little bit afraid of doing breath work, and it's okay. Like I promise you, there's nothing to fear. You're not going to be blasted out into an outer realm. You know, you can take it slow. You can trust yourself to go into your own fear.
Yeah, I thank you very much for saying that, because I think that does paralyze people from looking at any of their stuff. And I will also anchor that point that 99.9% of everything that you think is yours is probably not. Most of it is not.
Yeah.
It never was yours. You were doing the best that you can. It was dumped on you. It was perpetrated on you. It was applied to you. Whatever it was, you dealt with it at the time the best way that you can. It was never yours. So stop carrying around things that isn't yours. It came from something, someone, somewhere else. And that's the liberation of finally letting go of that stuff, because you don't have to carry it with you for the rest of your life any longer.
Oh.
Josh, man, I feel like I keep going.
Me too.
Thank you so much. And where can people find the app,
Yes.
the class, the 21 days? Because I know a lot of people are going to want to give this a go.
Well, dude, I want to just presence your generosity in the way you ask questions, in the way you take your time, in the way that you honor the sacredness of where we've come from. I felt that from you when I interviewed you on the podcast at your home. And being on your show is such a treat. And I hope everybody understands, like, these are not just normal conversations, man. So the way that you lead is awesome. And I would love to lead anyone that feels called to do this work, because it's something that, I mean, it's written on my arm, for Christ's sake. Se posso respirare, posso scegliere, which in Italian means if I can breathe, I can choose. And I got that after I got trained from Mark Divine because I really needed an anchor. So for everyone that needs an anchor, I'm actually going to be giving away 2 programs to your audience for free. All you guys have to do is go to wellnessforce.com/Darin, Darin, and you can enter to win there. Also, if you guys just want to go sign up for the program, we would love to have you. You can use the same code Darin, Darin, at breathwork.io. You get 20% off the program if you just want to dive right in. So, Darin, what a pleasure, man. Thank you for your generosity, your presence, your questions. It's been amazing.
Yeah, dude, thank you very much. And I know my audience is going to be grateful for that. Not only that description of what you've been dedicating your life to, but also the opportunity for them to anchor themselves in a greater space for themselves and for their life. And 2 people get a chance to win. How cool is that?
Yes.
Everyone loves to win.
Enter to win. And we might send you some other goodies too. Wink, wink. We probably will. Because we have some great people in our network. And so I think we'll just add in some goodies. But I'm super appreciative for the questions you asked, man. It's so refreshing to have a conversation where people are just talking about things that actually are of service instead of just of entertainment.
Yes.
But I still had fun too.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. Well, thank you for all that you're doing. And I'm touched and honored that you shared part of your story with us today. So thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Darin.